Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. Well, folks, here we are again. How is everybody? As you have certainly ascertained, this episode is covering the 1000 Books Art Book Festival. Even if I did tell you I would never cover a festival anymore. They are a pain to edit and organize, but man, it's so much fun to meet everybody. But the kind folks at Lolrot Vanrot, that is Johan and Flemming, are such great dudes, and were so welcoming that we had to do it. So that being said, it was actually well worth it. I had a really good time. Got to meet some new listeners too. So I'm going to keep this intro short because there's a lot to bite into here. I should probably mention that you may want to familiarize yourself with some of the links on the show notes for this page. Look at some of the images. It'll help contextualize a lot of the conversations. You'll see what the fair looked like, etc., etc. Even if I only spoke with a small percentage of the exhibitors and artists, as, you know, the same problem came up that always comes up, namely that they're busy presenting their works and engaging with the public, do not have time to talk to my annoying ass with a microphone. It still came in, though, at a little over an hour, so strap yourself in. We're going to start with Flemming Ove Bech. He's one half of Lolrot Vanrot, which is the publishers who organized and put this whole thing up. They're also a book publisher. Check out their work. But Flemming is going to talk about the new form of the festival. Some of you may remember it was in a supermarket before, and about the future of indie publishing. And that's starting right now. Yeah, now we're professional.
Yeah.
You know. Welcome back to the program.
Oh, thanks.
Here we are again after, what's it been, 2 years since the last one?
Pretty much exactly 2 years, I think. Yeah.
And this time it's a completely different thing.
Yeah, it's a different setting. It's a different... the onset is different. The ambition of the exercise, so to speak, is very different. In the supermarket, we wanted to basically bring a book fair to Copenhagen. We weren't really concerned, so we just wanted the independent publishing scene that was thriving, still is thriving, to be represented with a book fair in Copenhagen. And the supermarket setting was conceptually like a funny one, a fitting one.
It was great. People loved it.
It was cool, but it also was free rent, a lock on the door, lighting, Wi-Fi. We built tables out of pallets that were, that the grocer lent us, and so it kind of it fit in that way. And it was a
little more punk rock, do it yourself.
Yeah, it was a little DIY, and it was just a funny setting and more traditional book market, book fair in that sense. And then this year we wanted to it was a different totally different beast, different ambition. We wanted to deal with the thing of exhibiting books.
Which, as we heard at the seminar on Thursday, is a real pain in the ass. It's really hard.
It's super hard because the book is so refined, and it's has been honed and it's such an effective medium, and it's such an old medium, and it's a sequential kind of left to right or right to left, depending on where in the world you are. Content can't be viewed in one time, and you have to flip through it, and so. But like I said, also in the presentation at the talk, we have been asked to send books off to exhibitions about books, and that is where kind of we started thinking about this and talking about this, was that we didn't feel that displaying books or just laying them flat out on a table in a reading room session was reading rooms are great, but it was underwhelming as a exhibition experience, because the independent book publishing scene is so popular. So you'd get openings for the shows, and there would be so many people, and in an opening setting, you can be at a show with stuff on the walls, or sculptures, or sound installations, and you can be standing around socializing, but still in the art, and still see and hear and smell or whatever that you engage with the art. And engaging with 50 different books sprawled out on a table is not really easy.
Yeah, it's a whole different setup. It's much more of the old, it's a traditional market setup. It could be antiques you're selling, it could be books, it could be whatever.
Right. So we decided to invite, in this case, 13 imprints to propose how they would exhibit a book in a gallery setting. More specifically, it turned out, we approached Charlottenborg Kunsthal, and they thought it was a good idea, wanted to be in on it with us, and now we have a lot of space.
It's a huge frame. I mean, considering what you guys came from 2 years ago to this, it's been it's night and day,
Yeah, I think we have about maybe 600 square meters, maybe more, in these amazing galleries, 10-meter ceilings, and I think the invited exhibitors, imprints, artists have done an absolutely amazing job in utilizing the space and expanding their book projects, so to speak.
I agree. It doesn't look forced. You may be concerned that they would not, it would be hard for them to jump off the press and onto the walls, so to speak.
Right.
But it doesn't look forced at all. It's quite natural, and there's a nice fluidity between the printed matter and the exhibited content in the space.
Well, thank you. I like the spectrum that is represented as well. There's been a dance performance, sound, readings, flat works on the wall, more traditionally presented, textile works, clay sculptures, all kinds of different ways of... I mean, it looks like a contemporary art exhibition, which I think is fantastic. I'm really happy about that. Obviously, it's an eclectic, and in that sense, not tightly curated show, but, that's a part of the premise. We invited 13... very different publishers. Well, I mean, again, they span a spectrum as well. To invite artists that they've worked with on a book project to then try to expand it, like I said, and I think there's an interesting relationships between some of the installations, but and especially we have. How many rooms? We have 2, 4, 6. We have like 6 or 7 rooms, and I think there's a different vibe from room to room, and
totally,
and a nice flow through the whole thing.
Well, one thing that kind of really has struck me throughout this whole thing, to kind of change gears, I was at the seminar that you guys put on Thursday,
yes,
and it seemed like it was great. There was a talk by Marita Jankowski, which kind of set things off and ruffled some feathers about whether. The way I understood it were art books in a way underdeveloped, or overdeveloped. That they exist in a niche which keeps them outside of some of the critical eye,
right?
Which other art maybe falls under,
right?
What'd you get out of that?
Well, I think, like I said to her, or at the talk, I said that it was nice to hear how someone outside of this club, so to speak, looking in through the windows, is seeing this community, And I think when she said that so she commented on the fact that book exhibitions and book projects are often being. She was talking about semantics, basically, how a book show is being presented and presented in a way, or there was a title of a show called The Most Beautiful Swiss Books, and she said, what would happen if you called an exhibition The Most Beautiful Swiss Paintings?
Right, and the idea was you'd get shredded for doing that.
Right, and that she was kind of poking a little bit of a finger at the kind of holistic, kind of, ooh, this is handmade, but I think that...
Right.
I think that there is a validity to that comment and that observation, but I think that the people that we work with here and the best publishers out there would never try to add value to anything because of how it was made if it does not relate to the concept of the project in a broader sense.
Right.
So the fact that something is handmade is absolutely not something that adds value to anything if it's just by the virtue of being handmade.
Garbage is garbage.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that was fun, and it certainly woke people up, and
it did wake up a sleepy crowd for sure, and that was great. But I mean, it also struck me. It made me think about, like, we're used to books being perceived as a democratic process. Right. It's for everybody. They're available. They're affordable. And she put a question mark on that idea that maybe books aren't that democratic. That it is a closed niche. And if a book, it's all perceived value anyways. Right. And that, in a way, also struck me as a weird proxy argument for the art world in general.
Right.
It's the same things you talk about are museums. Who are museums for?
Well, one argument for the book being more democratic maybe than a show is that it does last. And I forget who brought it up, but there was the issue of, I think it was Bruno Ceschel, who talked about the fact that we don't have any way of archiving digital art at this point. Mm-hmm. And books are archival. And so
printed matter is archival.
And I mean, we don't print our books, for instance, in more than, I think the largest edition we've done is 500 copies. But that's not because we want to add value to it by the virtue of it being scarce. It's just because we don't want to be administrators and booksellers, really. We want to, we don't want to have boxes of books.
You don't want a garage full.
We want to, get one project out and then move on to the next, and then, down the line. And this is the practice that we see mirrored as well. Like, you might choose to then reprint a title on a different paper, or with a different color ink, or whatever. Or people like Taube Auerbach, who is producing open-ended editions under the moniker Diagonal Press, because she was just appalled by the kind of art market and the kind of secondary market trading of her works, is that her friends were not able to purchase her art. So she has now started making objects and books in open-ended editions, and will never sign any of it. And so there's a spectrum of practices that definitely kind of are examples of how books, in a way, are still democratic.
Right. I mean, compared to a painting on the wall, there's no argument.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, we're in a time right now where art books are, I don't want to say booming, but there's been a huge influx, mostly along with technological improvements or ease of use, like you said, there's so many more presses, there's so many book fairs, so much, just in 5-10 years. Do you think we're in danger of reaching peak book? Are we, or is it just onwards and upwards forever?
I don't know. I've certainly thought about it, and because... Yeah, it's just getting...
It's crazy, right? I mean,
it's crazy, but it's good, because there's so many cool books coming out, and it's frustrating that you can't keep up with... You want to see and handle all of it, which is at this point is impossible. But I don't know. I don't know enough about the kind of
I guess in a way it's
I don't know.
It's a
macroeconomics of the independent printing world. I have no idea.
Well, it's a stupid question because, in a sense, it'd be like saying, "Is the internet going to go away?" You know, it's just an ease of it's an accessibility and ease of use, and whoever wants to can do it.
Sometimes I think about it, like at one point, you know, having a website if you're an artist was kind of a big deal and a super efficient tool in getting your work out there, and was not something that everyone had or could have easily. And I've seen parallels with that with books now. Is that the book is such an effective way of efficiently communicating your work and representing yourself or your work as an artist, and maybe there's the next thing that becomes that effective, popular thing. But I mean, at this point, the whole it's not as prevalent anymore, thank God. But I mean, the whole beating of the drum about how print is dying is.
Oh yeah, that didn't turn out really to be.
I mean, a very successful British publisher that I'm not gonna name spent a lot of time kind of promoting their digital platform and their digital books and apps with books and stuff, and I mean, it just hasn't caught on. And
it's not a replacement.
Yeah,
in no way. It's another tool. It's another thing. But
and you shouldn't try to make a book on a digital. I mean, do something. There's so many cool digital art projects, super advanced on that deal with the circumstances of the digital condition, and that's much more interesting than trying to make a book on an iPad. Right,
and there's people even like The Exposed, who's showing here,
right,
who have a phenomenal platform blending the two.
Yeah, exactly. You have sound, moving image, all kinds of multimedia content, and that's much more interesting than trying to have something that you can flip through on an iPad. But then again, another point is that the digital platform and interface is still, we are still talking about a web page, and that is definitely from the book world, and
right.
you still go backwards and forwards through your browser, and your web pages are laid out.
You swipe on your iPad like turning a page.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely a correlation and a relationship that you can't dismiss, but I think it's getting a lot more wishy-washy. Yeah.
Well, I have one final question. I'll let you go here. Do you at all have time for your own work in all this? I mean, because no one's mentioning the fact that you are an artist also.
Right.
And you seem, you may be a little like me. You're drowning in other shit to do.
Right. I've spent more time and energy on being a bookmaker and whatever else it is that we do with Loyal Vanat than I have maybe spent on my own work, but that has certainly informed my practice and the way I think about my work. So in a way, working with Loyal Vanat has been working with my own work as well, and I have a few projects brewing that will turn into books in the near future, and a few shows coming up. So
it's happening.
I've had some time. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, as you probably started to gather, the setup of the show was having the publishers come and exhibit not only their books, but also to make an exhibition using some of the artists from their books. So we're going to start by talking to some of these artists. First up is Erik Steinbrecher. For this conversation, we're also joined by one of our producers, Laura Palmer. So, just to pipe you into the conversation here, what's your name and what are you here to do?
My name is Erik Steinbrecher. I'm kind of the guest of Winfried Heininger,
who has Kadoji Press.
Exactly. He's from, we know each other from Switzerland. He's German, he lives in Switzerland. I'm Swiss, I live in Germany. So we crossed our ways.
And you're presenting an installation next door, correct? Is that
It is a show, yeah.
It's a show, okay.
I installed the show.
Okay. Is it also there's a performance coming also, is that right? With some wet
I did this tiny performance before. I just made the 2 shirts wet. It's announced that I will do it in public, but I did not. So I just put it in water, and now they are dry again. They are business shirts. They have to dry quickly.
And they're hanging on the wall?
They're hanging on the wall, and I guess Winfried will make them wet again tomorrow. So it's a kind of a vernissage idea, you know, or fresco, painted in freshly, you know. It's the background.
A nice wet mosaic. Are you also presenting any books here? Winfried and I, we know each other for a while, and I do personally a lot of printed matters with different colleagues and designers, editors, and with Winfried. So I have to share a bit my energy and or I like to share and to shift. And with Winfried, we did, I guess, about 5 issues now. Oh, wow.
And these are to see here on his shelf. And for this venue here, event, we tried to do stuff. It's much more a poster, a folded poster, a wrapped poster, and it looks more like a affiche, a graphic, a poster. But it's not a book.
So what do you, I mean, for you, you've both, have a show and some printed matter.
Yeah, this is, we discussed that in the morning. I'm happy what I did, in the sense I gave everything, so I'm happy. This is a good technique. I learned that from a friend, Thomas Hirschhorn. It's quite known. He was once asked in public, are you content? And he became kind of angry. He said, I'm not content, I'm happy. And then they said, why are you happy? He said, because I cannot give more. So
because I did everything.
I'm not so pathetic, but just to say, yesterday evening I had a very good feeling because I found out something, and that's my goal, because in this case these fabrics and the fruits are older and newer, so I like them more and more to bring like boxes. This is like a Duchamp idea, to bring the box, open the box, develop, wrap in and go home. So this makes it the process quite relaxed.
So it's different every time.
And it allows me to not to project and go in and trust myself, And I do it as far as I can go, and till I'm happy, till I think it's okay. So I'm really thankful to be here because I found out something.
That's great. When that happened.
So and what I see a bit critical in the show is I'm an artist who, as I told you before, I do lots of different stuff like printed matters, commission works, collaborations, studio work, teaching, and this is for me a chance to. And I studied architecture. I'm not trained as an artist, so I'm really interested in spaces, in situations, and in process, and structure, and all that stuff. And for me, it's always on the level of étude. But this has a look of a piece which I like, and that's why I'm happy. And what I don't like about this show is that it feels a bit like kiosk next to kiosk, and a thing which pimps it up or illustrated it. For the next time, I will propose to install a huge space with the editors, and if they like, the kind of a satellite show. Here it's a bit
more like a market space.
Yeah, too separate.
It's a little hard maybe to differentiate between who's who and what's what here, but I guess that's kind of the problem with a book fair in general. How do you set it up So, I mean, would you want it to be more exhibition-like or more market-like?
I'm a bad businessman. That's why I'm not so much in market. Although my father was an economic, so I'm a bit close to this. But I could be fit, but I have no long time energy for that. So I like things as we spoke that they happen. Yeah. So this is a wonderful space, wonderful people, lots of ideas, and that's rich and fine. But the structure is not precise enough for me, for my taste, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I had an experience. I'm working with the guys who organized the Berlin Fair. We have two now. We have Friends with Books and Miss Reed. And I'm a bit in the team of the Friend with Books because we are friends, Vanessa Adler and Savannah Gordon, they do that. Mm-hmm. And they did it in December in the Hamburger Bahnhof. And there they tried as well to make a market mm-hmm. and a show. And they succeeded not definitely because they had more editor than they wished because they needed some money and had no support. Right. In the future, there will be a more selected market and a show. And the context is a museum so a show is normal.
Yeah.
And here's the same, and here's the mix is okay, but not on the point for me.
Yeah, I feel like I'm here as a visitor, really, and when the artwork is mixed with books, it makes you're a bit afraid to touch the books. They look more like an art piece, and maybe I shouldn't be touching it. So it creates a bit of a distance between something you're supposed to take a look at, perhaps. I don't know if many people had that same...
And what about the artworks? Is this the other one? They make it weaker, more weak?
It's kind of odd, because there was a performance going on.
Yeah.
I forgot the name of the artist. I think it's Three Women.
Meta,
yeah.
This lecture or this...
they're reading up some text.
Reading, yeah.
And at the same time, I was looking at books, so I felt like maybe I should look at books first and then look at artwork afterwards. So it would make sense to separate them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is in a way a grand experiment because the whole fair was based off of, it was created under the idea of having it in a supermarket, which just had a completely different audience and it was very much a market. And virtually no exhibition. They had no extra space. It was just a big square of tables where everybody stood on the inside and sold their books to the crowd on the outside. So this becomes an entirely different thing, and it's much more selective too. There was 2 or 3 times as many exhibitors the other times. Mm-hmm. So it was more anybody can come and do this, and if they feel it's so now we're talking to an art-going public. We're in a very well-known Danish art institution where the crowd is going to be familiar with the space, and so it's a whole different balance, essentially. And what you did, for example, your exhibition in there would be impossible in the other one. Yeah. It only works here because this is more of an exhibition context.
What I liked a lot discussing with these guys I mentioned in Berlin was to say that even a market, maybe in this certain context, or even in the supermarket, is supposed to be a show. To understand it as a market, yes, but as an apparatus, as a living thing, I think that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And that's why I would say to separate would be a good idea, even if it's a simple idea, just to bring it in the context of show. It's another show within a show. That would be, for me, the best. And I feel I feel okay, but a bit illustrating, as if I really like to step from field to field. I'm curious enough to do that. Let's say, working with architects or designers. So I'm okay to be in another field, but in here I feel a bit like a designer. It sounds strange, but it's when you do stuff like I do, unfortunately, you need a certain milieu or context to read it. Maybe.
What do you mean exactly? Like, what kind of milieu would you be looking for?
I mean, when I exhibit in other group shows, like in the art group shows, then it's more clear what it's supposed to be. I'm not sure if it is, but I feel like, you know.
Right. Well, that might be the experimental nature, or at least the fact that it's the first time they've held it here.
Yeah.
So they're perhaps learning as they're going.
Yeah.
I mean, people are looking at the books, and that's nice. But it seems... It may be the fact that it's not quite as alive as.
Yeah. That's. I think that's the shift. And if you would concentrate the touching, the looking, and the business, then it's one thing. And art, that's maybe the better answer. Needs a certain, and in this, when you do it like this, within other contexts, this context allows you. That's what I thought alone today. It allows you to be. In clausur, calm, concentrated, off everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are periods in art history they said go out of the white cube, go out. Connect life and art should be more connected. I think this is just one of many possibilities, and I really like. To be in museums or shows, to be calm, in contact with my stuff. And here I think it's a bit a cloud, or like really a context that brings you to the books. And I can say I don't like that so much.
Do you participate in a lot of book fairs?
Since a while, yes. Sometimes I have a table. I'm a businessman, and I must say, I like to take money. I mean, in a sense, I like if there is a circulation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have a lot of interesting talks, wonderful people, and it's really fun. The coffee tastes better if you sold a book before. That's really nice.
Of course.
No. Sometimes I go. I was in Basel, in Vienna, yeah, sometimes it's for me. It's a good trip, and yeah.
But I mean, you were talking earlier about how you pack out boxes for making an exhibition. It seems like the opposite is making a book, because you make it and that's it. That is your book. You can't change it. You can't reinterpret it. You can't do anything. But
as I said before, my practice is to think about what can I do within this structure and this structure. So every structure or space or event or opportunity allows this and this, and the other thing that is not allowed or it's not. So the book for me is a chance to make sometimes an independent show. You know, I use it as a space, a thing. No one comments anything, so I do it like autark, which is a chance. And it gives it allows me to give an idea about an issue, and that's it. And that's why it's not so concrete. You know, you can go through. For instance, the book I did with the hairstyles, or the shaky lake of Zurich, or the food rests on plates. So it's much more a view than a finished work. And I think for this approach, booklets are wonderful.
There was somebody.
It's still an open space, I would say.
There was somebody at the seminar on Thursday who said something really interesting. They said that artists see books as a visual space instead of a telepathic space. That would be that the reader creates a telepathic space within a book, if you think of a classic novel or whatever, whereas artists see it simply as an exhibition, a visual space. And I thought that was really an interesting way to define the difference between an artist book and a regular book.
I would agree, I would agree.
It's just a type of exhibition.
I restarted to read more. I stopped a bit, but I bought some glasses. Now it's more fun to read. So I really read, and I like this idea to read and close your eyes, kind of, and follow the writer. That's wonderful. But I think the way I perceive art or visual, for me, it's the same. I don't really think a painting is a precious thing. I need it as a vehicle, a door that opens me in a field, you know. Mm-hmm. So, but as I said before, a book is it's a show. Is
it more democratic than a painting? Would you say?
When you ask me concerning the economic or the marketing side, or I'm sure that I love the aspect of distribution with the books, because I can do a work and spread it out. You know, I like the idea. I invest, let's say, 1,000, and it costs €5, and the best way 1,000 people. So it's a huge work.
Right.
I like that.
And it's accessible to way more people.
It's accessible, and I like it.
Yeah.
At the other hand, is in our world, when it costs €5, it's worth like €5.
Right.
Means it can happen that it goes under the shelf, like, you know. But this is not my problem. This is
right. Perceived value. I mean, you're the creator. You're not necessarily the person who has to concern with long-term value, or most people at a museum would walk in and look at something and then go and walk away, you know. Yeah. Whereas maybe 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30 will sit and look and engage and think.
In any
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I could, but I better stop.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks to you. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And next up, we have Christian Aschman, who had one of my favorite books in the show. It's called The Space in Between. It's very photographic work. He was showing some prints from the series, which is also what's in the book, and he sat down to tell us a little bit about that project.
So my name is Christian Aschman. I'm a photographer, and I'm here in Copenhagen at the Kunsthal. I came together with the editor of my last book, The Space in Between, Théophile, from Théophile Papers.
Mm-hmm. And you're here to show this work, and I guess to meet people.
Yes, he was invited to show a few artists he published, and so he asked me also to show new pieces of coming out of the book.
Right. I mean, I guess that's the big thing for people who don't know, is that this show is not just a book fair, but it's actual exhibition too. They're showing works from artists who are showing books as well.
Yes, and then a further step in the work also. Just a new consideration of the images, and you're putting them differently together, different size.
Right, and I thought that was very interesting, because we spoke earlier about this project you have done. But it's you told me every time you exhibit it, you do it differently. You reinterpret the material you have.
Exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit about the project, the foundation of the project?
The start of the book, I spent 2 months in Tokyo in 2014 in an artist residency. And the space is called Yokobo Art Space. And the way I explored the city is I first used postcards which I had in Europe. I had one from my grand-aunt in my collection, and the second one I found it on a flea market in Brussels. And I quite often use postcards in my work. Either I publish postcards when I do a project, just I want the circulation of the images. And in this case I had the old ones which I took with me, and I really, at the beginning of my stay, I tried to find other ones, and I was especially interested by images after the Second World War, which was quite difficult to find. I could find a lot before the war, but after the war I didn't manage to find them.
What is it about those?
After the war?
Yeah, that specific time period.
I'm always attracted by the 50s, 60s, 70s, by those kind of images, especially
like the printing technology and
the printing and the colors, and it's also I'm from that period, so from the 60s. It's maybe a bit nostalgic. And then you can also see the evolution of the town, the architecture. So I choose images of architecture, of buildings.
And you photograph a lot of buildings too.
Yes.
In your own.
These images, these postcards were the departure point for my exploring of the city, just getting lost in the city and going back to those spots, trying to find the angles back, but not necessarily with the idea to do images before and after. But it was an aim.
Right, it was some sort of departure point.
Yeah, because I didn't want to go, and my main idea was also, before I left, was to avoid all the cliché images of Tokyo everybody knows.
There's a lot of them.
Yes, so it was really for me a personal introspection.
Right, right.
So I could have done it somewhere else as well, but it happened that I went to Tokyo for 2 months.
And then you noticed, or you told me, when you printed this book, you didn't show any so-called complete images. You wrapped them around the page.
But first I wanted to say something about the selection process. So 1 year after my stay in Tokyo, I worked every day, exactly the same day, on the editing of the images. I went through all the images again with another point of view, with 1 year behind me. And with all those images selected, I started to work on the book.
It's so hard to edit. You know, like when let's say you do a project, you shoot, let's say, 3,000 images. How do you make that into 50 images, you know?
Yeah, that was a long process, because when you work alone on projects, sometimes you're very related to images effectively. And it's difficult to separate from certain images which you like but are not necessarily interesting.
Right, or maybe they're good but they don't work for the project.
Exactly.
They're not going to help the project move forward.
I noticed that I have different kind of writings in my images which I selected. And at that point I went to the graphic designer, which I already planned to work on the project together. We have already done 2 other books together. I said, here's my selection, so now it's up to you to see what can be done.
To cut out the ones that I can't bear to cut out myself.
Yeah. And so he went to a very radical selection, and he finally chose 15 images.
Wow.
It was a bit too short for me.
Yeah. I think that's right. You should have more than 15, because the book does it. The book functions as kind of an overwhelming. It's very heavy. It's very dense.
It's its own space. So that was not enough for me.
Yeah.
And then at one point there came the idea. I saw a book where the pages were folded, and that was in some Japanese way. And that gave me an idea to fold my own images. And there came really up the main idea of the book, just to fold the images, to have half images. Some also are vertical images, which I didn't fold.
Right, it's hard sometimes to figure out if the image continues or not.
Exactly, and I have the tendency, is that correct?
You have the tendency?
When I shoot already, often my images are split in 2.
Okay.
By my framing already, naturally.
Is it very aesthetic for you, this kind of split? It changes the nature of the image and the way you interact with the image? Or is it more a way of getting the viewer to engage with it, or
and to get more lost in that city, more lost in that space, and it's becoming fragments of the city. And
right, because
I think the idea of splitting the images added that idea more.
But yeah, I mean, I think it does work, and like you said earlier too, that you don't necessarily know it's Tokyo.
No.
You know, these images aren't necessarily.
Could have been somewhere else as well.
Yeah,
but I was in that mood at that moment, and for me it's really a reflection of the state of my mind and the state in my life.
Right.
And it was really, and starting to fold the images was also for me interesting, just to take more distance of my own work and to go into something different, more.
Maybe destroy it a little bit in a weird way.
Destroy it a bit. I didn't also want to keep the paper fold.
You mean visually?
Visually.
Yeah.
So that's why we printed it recto verso.
Right, front to back.
Front back.
Yeah. Right, because it's not obvious at all.
To avoid also the Japanese touch,
right,
which you can find in the Japanese binding.
Right. Now, you kind of mentioned a little bit, but I wanted to ask, do you consider this architectural photography?
In some way, yes.
Right. It's not important, obviously, but it's obviously,
It's not very objective. I don't show necessarily the building in its entire way.
Right. Right, it's no document of an architect's work in
it's
that
more
sense.
work about surface and texture of the city.
Mm-hmm. So now you're done with this book, you're not photographing more, right?
Maybe I'm going to use the images, the new ones, adding them to the ones to Tokyo. I don't know where I'm going.
Okay, because I was just thinking you were talking about every time you exhibit it, you reinterpret the works.
For the moment,
then.
yes. So this is now the third show where I'm reusing images and showing them in a different way.
Right, and here you have some images which are probably about 100 by 120 or 40
90 by 120 centimeters. And as the idea was also, there was the fabric. So I choose images which are more into the material,
which play with the other pieces.
I don't know the English word for in the fabric, the tram.
The pattern.
The pattern.
Yeah.
So that's why I used the image, which is a screenshot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We have also the pattern. And the other one, the first one, there's also kind of pattern in the center.
Right, so it interacts a little bit.
Of fabric.
Right. Right. So you don't think this project ever will be necessarily done in a weird way? It just gets retooled each time it gets presented. Mm-hmm. You also mentioned earlier you're working on a new project with a construction.
Yeah, for the moment I'm following the construction of a quite big building, 6 buildings in fact, in Luxembourg. So I'm following this construction for the next 5 years.
Okay, so this is not anything we're going to see soon. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to some of the actual publishers from the event. We have Bruno Ceschel from Self-Publish Be Happy, who is easily my favorite publisher who was at this event. Their platform is just as much about books as it is about engagement with the public, about books and about publishing. And that's, in fact, why I like them so much. Yes. So, hello. Welcome back to the program. Do you remember from 2 years ago when I was here?
I do.
It's quite a different show they have this time around.
Very much so.
In terms of the supermarket versus the art hall exhibition space. Do you have any? I think a lot of people really enjoyed the supermarket. Was that a format you thought fit well for you, or was that?
I think it was an interesting experiment. And in a way, we were performing for the audience of the supermarket or the people that came to the supermarket. Possibly not the best way to sell books.
Right.
But it was an interesting exercise, I guess.
There was a nice dialogue between people who would otherwise never have seen art books, would not have, but they wouldn't necessarily buy it even if they were forced to look at it.
Yeah, and also people understand content based on the context of that's around it. So we understand in our book in a library or in a bookshop or in a museum, possibly less so in a supermarket.
Right, not next to the beer in the aisles.
Or frozen food.
Well, I think your publishing imprint is really, really interesting, and you have a kind of a different way of doing what could be seen as the same thing as a lot of people. Can you tell us a little bit about Self-Publish Be Happy and what the impetus was for you to start it and do this?
Well, Self-Publish Be Happy started with the realization that there were a lot of interesting books made by artists that needed to be or should have been seen by the general audience or an audience. So it started as a platform for these publications. So artists send their own publication, they become part of the library and, or one should say collection, and then they are posted online so people can have a look at them and purchase them
directly to the artists and publishers. And then so Publish Be Happy kind of grown into curatorial projects as well as its own publishing house. So we also make our own books. We have a program of events that often we do in partnership with other organizations. We have a SPBH TV, a YouTube channel where we commission moving image work. So I guess we're different in a sense that we are quite experimental and we are not afraid to try different things in different contexts.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, one of the things that's been very different about you guys has been the effort in dissemination. You've done, just like you already mentioned, you have a YouTube channel. You do a lot of collaborations with other institutions. You have a club people can sign up for to receive newest publications. It's a membership program.
Yeah.
And that, to me, seems like you're reaching farther than a lot of other experimental publishers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's partly to do with the kind of cultural landscape today that it kind of varies and pretty mutable and fast changing. So there's a kind of sense of keeping up with things. And also we get bored quite easily about things. So there's
you need to stay in people's face.
Well, sometimes it's just kind of... I think I also admire people that stick on something specific and they excel on it.
Right.
Why we just like to try different things.
Do you come from a curatorial background, or what?
I actually don't. I come from I studied sociology and I worked in magazines, and I lecture in photography and contextual studies.
Okay, so you were interested in the content before.
I always been interested in content. Yeah.
Okay.
But I never think about content, or rarely think about content in a three-dimensional space. So it was kind of interesting for me to, even though I created exhibitions, but coming here to Charlottenborg and do work with an artist in an exhibition was a interesting exercise for me. It's not something that I really do much.
Right, and it's just a completely different format. And it goes back to the discussions we had on Thursday at the seminar about exhibiting books and how it really is, trying to mash two contexts together which don't really work. Or at least it's very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because we didn't have to exhibit books in an exhibition, which is something that I don't think work. I mean,
I haven't seen it work.
Yeah, but I think the idea was to take the content and develop it in something else in a three-dimensional space. And I think Luke Stetner, who I worked with, has done a really good job. But also because of his practice, he made a book before, but his practice mostly sculptural and installation, as well as photography in form of collages mostly. So, yeah, for him this is not something extraordinary from his own normal practice.
Right. Do you think, you're part of this, I lack the right words, I wouldn't call it a movement, but this sort of boom in bookmaking brought about especially by the accessibility of publishing and the ease of use. Do you think we're going to reach some sort of burnout, some sort of peak book, some sort of, something that's happened? Because even, let's just look at the last 5 to 8 years. There's been a huge resurgence in interest in art book and just the amount of art book markets there are or events there are now.
I think we have kind of plateaus. And is it going to reduce itself? Yeah, maybe. Is that a problem? I don't know. Possibly not.
Well, good stuff tends to float to the top. Whatever problems you might have with art and, the dissemination process that brings it about.
Yeah. I think also now the artist book is part of a conversation, and I feel like it's going to be here to stay. Is it going to be... It's probably not going to feel like a novelty as it has been in the last few years, but that isn't a problem.
Right. Well, there's been an orgy of access. Anybody can self-publish and do their things.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah.
And the name, you call it Self-Publish, Be Happy, and does that have to do with this idea that you can do it yourself? I mean, because as far as I understand, you still curate content, but do you also help people produce books who have expressed their own interest in producing books? Or?
I don't really. I mean, we run workshops where, which is more kind of educational. The workshop are 2 days. I've been doing many of them in different countries, and people come and they have a kind of chance to work on their material with our support. Mine, sometimes there's a designer that helps as well, but we don't produce books for others. We have produced books for companies, but not for single people.
How many books do you put out a year on your imprint?
Not that many. They're like 3 or 4.
Okay. So more about quality than content.
Yeah, also we're doing too many other things. We're not a very dedicated publisher. And, we kind of handpick a couple of projects that we really care about every year.
So do you have any idea about the future, or is it more just kind of like keep seeing what happens, keep working, keep meeting people, etc.?
Yeah, we're doing bigger and bigger commission. For the second year, we are at Tate Modern, creating a program of events over the course of a weekend, which engage a kind of broader audience. That it's not just the people in the known of the community. And that to me is very interesting as an experience. We might start working on a tour. So I think a kind of broader engagement is what I'm interested, which is pulling 2 parts, because on one hand we're interested in kind of engaging the kind of general audience. On the other hand, like the book with Look is it's a very quite obscure book that you sort of have to be equipped to be able to read.
Right.
And I think those 2 things can exist together. I don't see them as conflicting.
Right, well, it doesn't always have to be the same, right? You can do different levels of work that apply to different areas. I think the book you made for Johan is also beautiful. I bought one of those just because it was such a fantastic object and it worked so well as a space for his work.
Yeah,
but that
it's quite a difficult book too.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Is it could be it could be called obscure as well.
Yeah, but then Johan, like other artists, I commissioned to do performances, and the performances they thought about reflecting or they practice in relation to a live audience. So they framed it in a different way that clearly is different from the book form.
Right. So it helps really to jump boundaries, to not think of book publishing as simply book publishing, but to think more in terms of an entire platform that engages with people on many different levels and brings people in at an entry point that may be the right one for them.
Yeah. If you look at the different publishers here, most of them operate in different fields. Is it fashion, music, curatorial projects, or gallery, or so. I think it's partly the nature of the independent publishers that probably the kind of more interesting one, I would hope.
All right. Cool. Well, anything else you want to mention?
No, that I can think of.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. And finally, we have Åse Eg Jørgensen, who has one of those names you really can't say any way except for in Danish. She's one of the co-founders of Pist Protta, which is a venerable publishing institute here in Denmark. Anyone from around here knows exactly who that is. They have been around since 1981, and they have this magazine / publishing house. It was perfect for me because since I'm not around here, I had a bunch of stupid questions saved up that everyone from here knows the answers to. So I finally got a chance to ask those questions. Well, this is a really good chance for me because I'm not from Denmark originally.
Okay.
So everybody here knows Pist Protta,
yes,
the publication you are a co-founder of, right?
Yes.
So now is my chance to ask those stupid questions, which everybody knows. But what exactly is Pist Protta and where did it come from?
Well, we lived up in the northern part of Jutland when we started, and I think we were like 21, 22 of age when we started, and it was, in the first place, it was like you could do a publication. And it was interesting to do a publication because you could collect a lot of material in the publication. Was that like technically it was possible, or you could get support to do it, or what do you mean you could do it? No, we did it ourselves. At that time there was in Aarhus, there was a place where you could go and you could come in from the street and you could print on a very small offset printer. And so you could actually do the thing yourself.
So you physically did? Wow.
Physically did it. And then we just wanted to try to do it, and we put down some rules, like it's one of the first rules was that it should never look like itself. It should always change format, and if possible it should change how to be printed and so on. But format at least, and we shouldn't use the same typography like we would. It should be more like free. So it was a dogmatic rule, but I think it has been rather good because you can always say to yourself that because you did this, you can't do it one other time, so you have to look for another way to do it.
Well, I mean, that goes exactly against what you would normally think a magazine would be. Yeah, they have the same cover, the same font, the same layout. Maybe they change once every 5 years or something, but, it's basically the same branding the whole way through.
But so it sets a lot of possibilities free to have this rule, actually.
So now you guys are by far the magazine that's existed the longest, the art magazine in Denmark.
Well, I'm not quite sure we are by far, because there are some other small ones, but we have to, right now I've forgotten the names, so we have to...
Yeah, there you go, that's...
Some of the yes ones, but we are one of the oldest, yeah. But I think that what is... Again, it's like you could say that in a way it's like a caricature of a magazine, because we have this rule that we change, and then we have an ambition to sort of be art instead of being about art. So you wouldn't find like a big report on any kind of art material. It would be more like you could say it's on the printed materials premise, but it still has some kind of originality.
Right. It's not art forum. It's not journalistic view on arts or anything like that. But I mean, I think it's pretty commendable and astounding that you guys have been doing it this long. I mean, it's a ton of work.
In a way, we must be both stupid and stubborn.
That's the best combination.
Yeah. But then I think that I had the feeling that when we reached number 10 or something, it started to be really worth doing it, because you have sort of put out a kind of body that will grow when you make a new. So, and what's interesting to me as well is that we have done the whole, you could say, digital revolution with the media.
Right, you guys have been through the whole thing.
Analog, yeah.
What year did it start?
We started that it was analog.
What year was that, though?
In 1981.
81, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so you guys have been through the whole ride from the 70s era's offset printing technology and binding straight through now, where you can get it printed in Lithuania and shipped up here or whatever it might be. What's the name come from?
The name is, we were looking for something that you would think would mean something and then doesn't. And then there's this story, and all of us tells it differently. But this Jesper sitting down back here, he he took courses in Old Norwegian, Old Nordisk.
Yeah, the original Norwegian, old Scandinavian language.
And then he liked to sort of drop a word here and there, and he wrote to a mutual friend of ours, and he had made his own word, like Pist Protta. It's with this letter that's spelled the, and it looks a little bit like a P. And the meaning of the word combined would be art wash.
Art wash.
and then this mutual friend, he wrote back, well, I don't really understand what you are doing there in your Pist Protta. And so we sort of was given the name.
That was the name he invented to...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what has happened for you guys in terms of, it's obviously been around for so many years. How has it changed in your mind as a tool for exhibiting art or making art?
That's a broader question. Maybe I'll have to answer. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that would be personally, obviously, for you.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, the question really at its roots.
In a way, it has been all the way through a kind of laboratory where we could sort of get ideas and try them out. And things, I'm working as a graphic designer as well, and things I couldn't do in my graphic designer life, or things that I've done in Pist Protta I would use later, or things I could be done there, and
a platform for experimentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think that the way it's also a platform that you speak from when you are sort of trying to connect with people. And if we want to invite somebody, it's sort of the whole pile of Pist Prottas that we stand on now. So the diversity is important.
Right. Well, I mean, you guys seen so much come and go in a way, and you, like you say, the pile. You stand on this archive, you can show and talk about. But I mean, I'm thinking also it's a huge amount of work to produce a magazine.
Yes.
So I mean, there must be some times when it's 3 a.m. and you're working on it, and you're just thinking, oh my God, what?
Yeah, and often we have this. We are not coming regularly, but we try to come with 2 issues a year. But sometimes it will be by the end of September and start of January. So
it comes when there's time and space for it. Yeah.
And sometimes, of course, it's really it's tough, and sometimes, I think that each issue has a tough period.
Yeah, right. At the time where you think it's never going to work, or it's.
But then again, I think that it's emancipating in a way. So because there's always a place where you could put something in this, and that it is a collaborative work is important as well.
Yeah. Right, and like you said, it probably opens doors both personally inside yourself with ideas for your work and also with other people. One of the reasons I started this show was in order to meet people and talk to people because I'm not from here and I wanted to have this discussion.
Yes.
And that, having some sort of platform or format to do it in is a fantastic
the same
way.
In a way with this platform, which is indeed a platform.
Yeah. But I mean, the problem I'm having, and I'm sure you guys have been through a lot, is questions of funding because there's no money in this sort of thing.
For quite a while, I mean, many years, we have a slide funding from the slide state funding. There's, we have this Kunstfonden, and there's udvalg.
The selection committee.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
For magazines, art, not only art magazines, but magazines as such.
Right, publications.
But culture magazines. So it might be, for instance, a magazine that's given out by museums or something like that. But yeah, so we are getting something from them each year.
Is that a permanent thing, or do you have to apply every time?
We have to apply.
See, that's the problem, or that's not the problem. It gets easier with time, but it's a lot of work not to have a stable foundation to work on.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily...
And we have also to, of course, to think whether sometimes in between we have to think whether we would stop it if we don't get funding, or whether would we carry on, and how could we carry on. So.
Right, because you can put all the time you want into all the time you have into it, but it's another question when the printing costs come out of your own pocket.
Exactly. That's another thing.
But I mean, I think at this point you guys are an institution in the Danish arts world.
We tend to think of ourselves as an institution.
Cool. Well, thank you for telling me about it. I appreciate it.
I'm very glad to tell you.
Thanks. Cool, guys. That was it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you do take the time to check out some of the images and some of the works which were on display. You can find links to each and every publisher and artist on the 1000 Books website, which we've linked to as well. There was so much more than we even started to get to. So that was another one of our occasional forays into public life. Keep an eye out for us in the future. You can find info about events we partake in on our Twitter and Facebook page. Indeed. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by The Passion Hi-Fi. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our publishing pile of a website, undergang.net. If you do like the show, we would greatly appreciate it if you'd take a moment to leave a review or star on iTunes so others can find us. This show is produced in part with the kind support of the Danish Arts Council. And that was episode 80, huh? How about that? Thank you so much for joining us.